Welcome to Conclave March edition. It's extraordinarily exciting to be here in several cities of the world simultaneously and to think about poetry and music with three wonderful poets who are also musicians. I won't limit their poetry by saying that they're poet musicians. They are poets who are also musicians. Hélène Gelèns, Patrick Dubost and Christa Boberg. They are very different poets from each other. They've never read together before. And I think we're in for a really exciting, it's afternoon here, so a really exciting afternoon in which we discover some of the limits of that link between poetry and music. And our first poet who's going to read is Hélène. Each poet will read for about a quarter of an hour. It'll be a sort of little discussion afterwards, but we will keep questions, and which I'll ask you to put in chat to begin with, for the end of the session. But please feel free to comment on chat as we go. Anything you particularly like, anything that it reminds you of, you know, where you can buy the books, all this sort of thing. But obviously, listen to the poetry. So Hélène is I'm now going to read her bio note because I will say it better. Hélène Gelèns is an award-winning Dutch poet, also a writer of essays, prose, radio plays and libretti. At the moment, she's based in Antwerp in Belgium. She's undertaken an exploration of various academic disciplines at the universities of Leiden and Amsterdam, ranging from astronomy, which is extraordinarily impressive, and Dutch literature to medieval history, and eventually she majored in philosophy. Musical in nature, her poetry is vibrant and playful at heart, often harboring multiple voices. If the right word for an emotion or a new situation doesn't exist, Gelèns will happily compose one. A keen performer, she likes to lock arms with musicians and composers. And also her poetry has this wonderful characteristic, rhythmic, kind of sonic life, which is almost independent of the sense, I'd say. Her poetry has been translated into Chinese, English, German, French, Spanish, Polish, Romanian, and Albanian. English translations of her poetry have appeared in UK-based literary magazines, including Ambit, Poetry London, Poem, and The North, and US-based magazines such as Interment Magazine, Pleiad, and Sampsonia Way, which is very interesting since my name is Sampson and it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It's a yes, wonderful coincidence. Well, a huge welcome, Hélène, to you. Really looking forward to listening to you. And everyone else, let's please mute so we can hear the reader best.
So, hi everyone, and thank you for having me, Fiona and Sudeep. I'm really grateful for that. I was looking forward for it all week, so that's a good thing, I think. I will read from three volumes of poetry. The first poem I read is it's the second poem from my first volume. I will read it in Dutch, Don, so maybe you can, yeah. It's Stammer the Name, it's the first one. Adem rustig in en uit. Adem in en uit. Denk aan de naamdrager. In en uit. In en uit. Goed zo. In en spreek de naam uit. Hap naar de naam. Probeer te happen naar de naam als naar adem. Zo ongeveer. Hap, hap. Happen naar de naam. Hap, hap. Niet hoesten. Happen. Hap, hap. Niet hoesten. Adem rustig in en uit. Adem in en uit. Niet hoesten. Adem in. Adem in. Snak naar adem, als naar de drager van de naam. Hap naar adem. Probeer te happen naar adem. Je moet nog stamelen. Hap. Hap. So, the thing with music in poetry, I think, and also if you play for with language, and you and you want to say something, it's really difficult to translate. So a lot of my poetry is very difficult to translate, and it becomes a bit more easy. I will now read Halt. It's the next one, Don. Yep. It's from my second book of poems. Take Off and Float. My translator named it. Halt. Halt houden. Hoe vaak al niet. Gisteren nog letterlijk halt. Teruggepiept naar een guttopen niet brommenbord. Vandaag nog in kwart tempo geslingerfietst. Door de tunnel die tinkelt, reutelt, plonkt. Zo vaak. Op een rechte weg naar huis, een zijweg in. Daar heuvelt het, kronkelt het, zindert het zomers. De dag beginnen met vrijen, blijven vrijen, eindeloos. Terwijl je weet, je moet weg, aan het werk, iemand wacht. Halt. Je legt je adem in wat zwiepzwaait, vonkelt, klinkt. Er is altijd een plek voor je hand om te rusten. Maar je steigert als iemand klaagt. Houd nou toch eindelijk halt. I will read in Dutch the next poems, Don, so that's maybe easier. I will read. This is a series of poems on running. And the second and third one, Fiona has translated with me together, and Carlien van den Beugel. The first one is translated by a different translator. In ongeremd rennen. Volg je het pad tot je het pad tevoorschijn rent. Ren je de zon tevoorschijn en een duinvallei. Het mulle zand, het helmgras, het geruis van de zee. Ren je de zee tevoorschijn, een steeds onmetelijker zee. The next one. Niet wij rennen. We denken aan doelloos, aan ongeremd rennen. We rennen en rennen, vertragen het beeld. Zet af, zweef en land. Elke pas rolt van de hak naar de bal van de voet, naar de grote teen. Elke afzet vol kracht, elke pas voor de sprong. Zet af, zweef en land, zet af en zweef. We zweven in ongeremd rennen. We luchtklieven meer dan we grond raken. Zet af, zweef en land, zet af en zweef, land, zet af. We denken ons doelloos, ons ongeremd rennend. We lopen ons leeg, het lijf tot een pijl. Moeiteloos rennen we, niets doet nog pijn. Niet wij rennen, het park rent. Next one. So this is these two poems belong together, and the first one was the ideal of running. And this next one is the actual running in the Vondelpark in Amsterdam. It's a very crowded park, and it's not so easy to run there. Not so easy to have this unrestrained running I was writing about earlier. So the rhythm is also different. It's not this ideal. We dragen nu loopschoenen, rennen langs moeder rots, langs vondel. We rennen door bosplantsoen, rozentuin, knerpen op schelpguis. We denken ons doelloos. We ploeteren doelloos het paardenpad af met opstuivend zand. Ook het pad rent. We rennen en denken ons ongeremd rennend. We punteren een voetbal terug naar het veld of een boom in. We denken ons ongeremd rennend. We rennen ons een langharig mormel in de kuit. Rennen ons het getier van zijn baas in het oor. Want wij zijn het, wij rennen, een hond weet niet beter. Niet wij rennen, het park rent. And now I almost miss your reading, Fiona, because your reading is so wonderful, the English translation. I love it. Yeah, so I won't read this one and also not the next one. Don? Yeah, that one I will read. This poem is about, it's a poem for two voices and a clock. There are two voices. It's about the biological clock. One voice hears the clock and the other voice doesn't hear it. And it's not what you expect. Gedicht voor twee stemmen en een klok. Tik. Hoor, hij tikt. Tik. Je klok tikt. Tik. Mijn klok tikt niet. Er tikt niets. Ik hoor niets. Je denkt tik. Tik niet. Tik. Tik niet. Tik. Maar je weet. Tik. De klok tikt. Tik. Dus je zegt. Tik. Hij tikt niet. Tik. Ik hoor niets. Ik hoor geen klok. Geen getik. Niet één tik. Tik. Maar hij tikt. Tik, je klok tikt. Tik, je wilt het. Tik, niet horen. Tik, wacht maar, jouw tikklok, jouw klok. Tik, gaat nog wel tik, tikken. Niet één tik. Er tikt niets. Die klok bestaat niet. Je denkt tik, tik niet, tik niet, tik. Tik niet, tik. En later, tik, de spijt. Tik, hij tikt niet meer. Tik, tik nooit meer. Tik. Wat als je tik spijt krijgt? Wat als je de klok verzint? Wat als het kindje spijt? Tik, je weet niet. Tik, wat je mist. Ik weet niet wat ik mis, maar jij weet wat jij mist. Wat jij mist, tikt. So I'm going to the next poem. Closing time, it's, I think. Yeah. This is from a different collection. First poem. It's closing time, but it's the first poem of the book. Je bepaalt, dat is pluis. Dat is niet pluis. Dit hier, pluis. Dat daar, niet pluis. Vroeger, niet pluis. Nu pluis en straks. Vanuit het donker, applaus. En je zegt ijdelheid, ijdelheid. Alles is ijdelheid. Je schrapt. Ijdelheid der ijdelheden. Zegt alles is. Alles is. Alles is maar wat het is. Je schrapt alles. Alles. Zeg je ineens, 5 uur is de sluitingstijd van alles. Terwijl je nog schrapt, applaus vanuit het donker. Je weet niet, pluis of niet pluis. The next poem, I think it's, yeah, ill-advised. This is a long one, and this is, it's also always a bit difficult to read if I haven't done it in a few, well, maybe in a year. So it's always a bit difficult to read, but I really like to do it. It's a situation. You have to imagine a situation. It's a dangerous situation, and there are two voices. The one voice, well, doesn't know exactly what to do in this situation and is afraid. And the other one gives advice. Onraad. Voet, voet, vloer, voet, riek, voet, vloer. Durf je niet op te zien? Concentreer je. Zet vol vertrouwen een stap achteruit. Observeer het al te bekende. Een blubbervloer, de linkervoet bloot, de rechter op slipper. Links voor een rechterlaars en rubbergroen. Midden voor grijs stalen riektanden. Rechts voor een linkerlaars en rubbergroen. De riek zwiept uit zicht. Sluit je ogen zich. Bedenk iets innepts. Doe als de fysici. Verwacht je deeltjes? Postuleer ondeeltjes. Verwacht je lege ruimte? Postuleer een wirwar van activiteit. Nu jij. Vertrouw op je denkkracht. Je verwacht een riek. Bedenk een niet-riek. Een onriek. Iets aricaals. Onriek, niet-riek, arik, onriek, niet-riek, arik, onriek, niet-riek, arik, paniek, niet-riek, pori. Stop! Fysici walsen niet. Doe als John. Zeg 10 maal gravitationeel totaal ineengestorte sterren en je verzint zwart gat. Jij. Vertrouw je verbeelding. Next slide, yes. Niet trik, niet trik, niet kriet, niet kriet, trikt, niet, riet, niet, riet, niet, riet, paniek, niet, paniek, riet, paniek, riet, panfluit, jotten. Verwacht je een riek, werp een panfluit op, doe als pan. Fluit met luimheese klanken de ander paniek aan. Fluit, fluit. Duizel je? Durf je nog niet op te zien? Doe als de filosoof. Realiseer je wat je probeert. Je probeert te vertrouwen. Ik vertrouw, 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 vertrouw. Ik weet niet meer wat. Ik vertrouw. Wat is dat toch, vertrouwen? Ik zie op. De riek nadert mijn oog. Schamt mijn kaak. Doe als Jezus. Keer de riek je andere wang toe. Nee. Raakt de riek ook die kaak? Wat doe je? Wat doe je? Next one. Arieklied. Onrik, nitrikari, konrik, nitrikari, konrik, nitrikari, paniek, nitripori, panrik, nitripari, paniek, a, nitrik, 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 paniek, paniek, graniek, graniek, graniet. Ik ga niet, ik fluit, fluit, fluit. Well, that was really difficult to translate for the translator. But I think there are lovely things in there. Canto for panic, anto, and can't go. So he found things that are really nice. Oh dear, where was I? Can you please, Don? Yep. Oh yeah. This one I will read in English because I really like it. And this one is, we had this poetry trio translation project what I, with Fiona and William Herbert and Sean O'Brien and 2 other Dutch poets and other translators. And this one, we really had to find a way to get some using it, and it's a bit different from the Dutch, but I'm reading the English one now. Hey there, past light. Hey there, present light. Hey there, lost light. Hey, forgotten light. Past desk lamp light, fridge light, whole light, present neon light, scattered sky glow light, lots of forgotten light, but not light forgetfulness. Everyone here lives on light on sunny days. Feet and heads stick out of houses. Beaming battalions march through the streets. Pianos and double basses roll into parks. Already on the darkest mornings, my neck is stretching for daylight. My rocket fuel, here I am, right here. Wherever I live, wherever I work, next to me I hack a light hole. And the nice, maybe Now I have to find it. Yeah. So in that, maybe you can go back to the last one. Yeah. So in Dutch, I didn't have this double light, but we needed something of the playfulness of the Dutch. And in Dutch it is hela, only the first, I don't know how it's called. The first 4 lines. Hela verleden licht, hela tegenwoordig licht, hela verloren licht, vergeten licht, verleden bureaulamplicht, koelkastlicht, ganglicht, tegenwoordig neonlicht, hemelgloed, strooilicht, heel wat vergeten licht, maar geen lichtvergetelheid. And I really like this light. Yeah, we needed something extra, and we found it. Well, Bill found it, of course, and yeah. So my last poem is from a series. It's not an Out of the Dark, so I think it's the last one done. Done? Yep. Yeah, I know there's I forgot there's I'm sorry. It's from a series, and it's again a situation. You are in a situation you don't know anyone there. You have no clothes on. Nobody really looks at you, but you don't know anyone. The first poem is about that, and the second poem as well. And at the end, it's, well, maybe they fear me. And that's what this poem is about. Ze vrezen mij niet, vrezen mij niet, vrezen mij. Maar één wijst, vreest mij niet, maar, vreest mij niet, maar één. Vreest mij niet, één wijst, vreest mij. Roept jouw beurt, vreest mij niet. Wat op het spel staat, vrees mij. Wat vooraf ging, vrees mij niet. Wie er meespeelt, ik speel mee. Ik speel niet mee. Ik speel mee. Ik speel niet mee. Ik speel mee. Wie de regel speelt, dat speelt mee. Dat speelt niet mee. Speelt mee. Speelt niet mee. Regels bepaal ik. Die speelt niet mee. Die speelt mee. Die speelt niet mee. Die speelt mee. Maar één speelt. Speelt niet mee, maar speelt niet mee. Maar één. Speel. Speel niet. Speel. Speel niet. Eén spelt. Speel. Thank you. Thank you.
That's absolutely wonderful, Hélène. And what's really sort of salutary is how much the rhythm obviously propels the meaning, which we always think it does. We always think rhythm is the vehicle in a poem, don't we?
Yeah.
But for you, it's a much more profound strategy. It's a kind of form of thought.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, actually, yeah, for me it is. Yeah. And well, I was really glad to find something in the poem with the tick, because there is time is also in play, and that's so, yeah, that's really difficult, of course, in a poem. That's a music. You always have time, but in a poem it's different. So yeah. So I really the first time I read it was I had to read it with a harp player. I don't know, is it harp? This is very okay. I didn't know. And she said you should buy and I already had one, but I never used
metronome.
It. Yeah, metronome. So I practiced it with a metronome. Yeah,
I'm going to ask you about practicing, actually, and also about composing on the ear rather than on the tongue. Because we talk about composing on the tongue, but
yeah. Well, the thing is, I write this poem, and then it's a paper poem at first, and I don't have a way. Of course, I hear it in my head, so it's more of the tongue. And then afterwards, I have this poem, and I know I have to perform it. So I want to perform it, and then I'm looking for a way to do it. And sometimes it takes sometimes well, you have this situation, you really have to work with someone else, and it has to be on a certain night. But most of the time the poem grows, it starts all over. After writing the poem, it starts all over, and sometimes I really have to change something because it doesn't work in the performance.
I was going to ask you about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have the English one, the English version of the poem For Two Voices and a Clock. I was in 2012. We had 5 Dutch poets. We had a tour in the United States, and we were reading most of the time in English. And when I read that in English, it was always something like well, it was slower. And I was reading it one time with a pianist, and I was reading it in Dutch and then in English. And she was so surprised that she had to play very slow the second time. Yeah, there are more words in the English version in between. So I can't.
Are there other languages that are a sort of impediment like that? Are there other languages when you notice, even if
sometimes it's, but most of them I haven't. Yeah, English versions I have read for audience, but the other ones, one time a German version, but I'm not so at home in the German language. So, but it is, and sometimes, of course, well, a translator just translates it, and I'm not there. So it becomes something different, of course. I don't know about my Chinese translation.
No.
Yeah.
I was thinking that there's something about your poetry which exposes a paradox about language. I mean, obviously, because it actually, by making sound and sense coterminous, making them the same, it actually pulls them further apart because it denaturalizes that relationship.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Just wondered if you wanted to say anything about that before I segue to introduce.
No, just go on because I think you.
You have a question from.
I'm sorry. You were.
No, that's it. I wasn't going to say any more. It's not for me to say.
Oh, yes. It's interesting because I never thought about that actually. For me, of course, I try to make it work together. So that's interesting that you say that it takes them apart. I can imagine. I haven't thought about it at all, so I have no answer whatsoever. Oh no.
I just think it's really fascinating and destabilizing. I mean, yes, it's really fascinating and always destabilizing, as well as very, very enjoyable listening to and reading you. I mean, it's a really, really interesting experience. It's not a thought experiment for the audience because it's fully there. They're there as poems, but it's like going into a different room somehow. It's wonderful. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
Well, thank you enormously. And please don't go away because we might have time for conversation at the end. And you have a question from Anna in the chat as well, actually, which you might want to chat back to or leave for later. But meanwhile, it's going to be my great pleasure to introduce our next. I want to say reader, but I also want to say performer and musician. That's to say Patrick Dubost. Now, I have posted his bio, but I can only, for some weird reason, get it to go to the wrong person. So it's gone to Don, but it's not universal. But that's a good thing because I've got to translate it. So you won't know quite how ropey my translation is. So Patrick Dubost, after studies in maths and musicology, Patrick devoted himself to poetic writing on paper, but also in electroacoustic music studios. He's the author of more than 30 books published in France or Quebec. He's also been published and translated in Greece, Croatia, and Albania. I'm sure the list is longer than that also. Often accompanied by his alter ego, Armand the poet, who himself has published more than a dozen books and who is a trickster figure who is not to be trusted. Patrick, that's my parenthesis, that's not in Patrick's bio note. Patrick practices his reading performance, giving an understanding of his texts with his voice. So it's a different stage. The music and the rhythm in Patrick's work arrives at a different stage from where it arrives in Hélène's work, I would say, as an enthusiastic fan of both poets. And his gestures and the exploration of diverse possibilities of sound technique. Each poem has a sound disposition, and it also has a visual and poetic autonomy. I might leave it there because it's getting a little bit philosophical. Patrick is a sound poet of a very different kind from anything we have in the Anglophone world. And one of the reasons that I adore his work is that it's so profoundly philosophical in the words, as well as so profoundly musical and performative in the performance. And it's an extraordinary and heady combination. And I have somewhat failed Patrick in the sense that I'm not being his co-reader today because of things going on here. So Patrick is going to wonderfully perform with the screen and for us in a kind of bilingual performance. Patrick, it's an enormous pleasure to welcome you again. Thank you.
Well, you hear me? Yeah, yes. I will read in 5 times. The first time, not this one. I prefer to see my, not this one. Oh yeah, I prefer, I show you this, you see that? Yeah. Sans besoin de rien dire. Voilà. This is un livre d'artiste translated in this edition in Macau, in China, English and French. I will read some extract. It's the first time in my life that I read in English, so I think it will be not very good, but I try. 5 horses running away through the mist with no need of being told. 5 chevaux fuyant dans la brume sans besoin qu'on les dise. Light not needing to be told, lumière sans besoin d'être dite. An image appears or disappears and nothing is said. Une image apparaît ou disparaît sans que rien ne soit dit. The shadows of clouds follow clouds with no need to say a thing. Les ombres des nuages se déplacent avec les nuages sans besoin de rien dire. Life makes its way through micro-events with no need to be told. La vie fait son chemin de micro-événements sans besoin qu'on la dise. The ephemeral is there for all we know. We live with, we forget without having to say it. L'éphémère est là pour tous, on le sait, on vit avec, on oublie sans avoir à le dire. If you agree tonight, we'll sleep under the stars with no need to say anything. Si tu veux bien, ce soir, on ira dormir à la belle étoile sans besoin de rien se dire. The stars make no noise. They tell us the universe without saying anything. Les étoiles ne font aucun bruit, elles racontent l'univers sans pourtant ne rien dire. Over the centuries, the bell of the church rang so much that it has nothing further to say. La cloche de l'église a tant sonné au fil des siècles qu'elle n'a plus rien à dire. Each morning, the birds pierce the silence because they have too much to tell. Chaque matin, les oiseaux trouent le silence pour avoir trop à dire. The poem is always off track, set aside from what one has it say. Le poème est toujours à côté de ce qu'on lui fait dire. In thunderstorm, we hear the profusion of what is left to be said. Dans l'orage, s'entend la profusion de ce qu'il reste à dire. After the thunderstorm, the ground is strewn with words refreshing the air, with nothing needing to be said. Après l'orage, les mots jonchent le sol et laissent l'air tout frais d'un besoin de rien dire. The flowers slowly wither with no need of being told to do so. Les fleurs fanent lentement sans besoin qu'on leur dise. A meteorite falling from the sky draws a line concerning which we too easily admit it would have nothing to say. Une météorite qui tombe du ciel trace une ligne dont on admet trop facilement qu'elle n'aurait rien à dire. One day we go without making a sound and without having nothing to say. Un jour, on s'en va sans faire de bruit, sans pour autant n'avoir plus rien à dire. Voilà, c'était traduit par Kit Kellen et Béatrice Machet. J'enchaîne avec... I go now with this book, Manifeste pour un théâtre moderne, translated by Eleanor Margolis. It's okay. With the text now, article 7. Yeah, with the, yeah, article 7, yeah. Article 7. Un acteur sur un plateau produit régulièrement plus d'énergie qu'il n'en consomme. Ce phénomène est en contradiction avec l'une des lois élémentaires de la physique. Article 27. Le chaos et l'indétermination sont au centre de toute pensée théâtrale. Une pensée qui, au sein du théâtre, ne pose pas la question du chaos et de l'indétermination est une pensée parasite, anachronique et donc récupérable dans un souci bien structuré de chaos et d'indétermination. Article 33. Un texte inachevé remet en question l'équilibre du monde. Article 35. Le théâtre moderne n'est pas contagieux, bien au contraire. Pour chaque nouveau malade, on dénombre 3 guérisons. Article 38. Ce qui nous réunit au théâtre, c'est qu'on n'a pas à tourner les pages. Article 39. Toute proposition s'entend avec sa réciproque Les mouvements, les lumières, les costumes s'entendent avec leur réciproque. Le public aussi s'entend avec sa réciproque et réciproquement, tout ce qui s'entend avec sa réciproque fait proposition au théâtre. Le théâtre est réversible, parfaitement réversible, si bien qu'on ne distingue pas toujours la réciproque de la proposition initiale et réciproquement. Article 42. On imagine facilement des discours compliqués sur des spectacles pas trop compliqués. On imagine plus difficilement des discours simples sur des spectacles compliqués. Le compliqué dans le discours est toujours un peu simple. L'un peu simple dans le réel est toujours un peu compliqué. L'un peu compliqué du théâtre moderne est en réalité très simple. Et pour finir, article 46. Tout homme qui s'endort au théâtre est un envoyé du ciel. Voilà.
C'est tout?
Oui.
Oh, alors merci.
Troisième temps.
Bon.
Third reading. I will make this with sound. I put a sound. Sorry.
L'avenir.
Je
suis
assis au
présent et je
regarde
l'avenir. J'essaie de
voir au-delà, mais
l'avenir
est un objet
opaque. Je me lève
et le contourne
doucement.
doucement. Et maintenant, je vois
L'avenir.
de dos,
Je vois
mais n'est que légèrement
opaque. J'essaie
au-delà d'apercevoir le
présent. J'aperçois
ma
je me dis
plantée devant et plus loin ma que si je me retourne encore, je verrai
l'avenir
sans guillemets, je me retourne et je vois l'avenir. Derrière l'avenir, il y a l'avenir. Je contourne. Number 2. Je me retourne et je vois. Number 2. Je me retourne et je vois. Number 3. Je marque un temps d'arrêt. Je me pose la question du le problème de la après une course d'élan de 8 mètres, je franchis number 3, puis number 4, et je continue de courir et sauter, mais sans plus me soucier du ou de la jusqu'à number 10. Plus rien. À même le sol, à une quinzaine de mètres. Non. Ligne d'arrivée. Je franchis. Beaucoup de bruit sur les gradins. Mes ancêtres
Mes
Mes descendants, ils font un raffut d'enfer. Je suis encore au...
présents zéro.
Je me retourne sous les cris, les projectiles. Je vois la perspective des Rinval.
Et tout au fond de
Ma
âme
chaise est vide. Voilà. J'enchaîne avec quelques tout petits extraits de ce texte qui s'intitule pour ne pas mourir, so as not to die, translated by Fiona Sampson as the precedent text. Voilà.
And actually, Patrick, I'm just going to speak over you for a minute to say, Don, so the one that you just showed us, Don, that's the one that's coming now, so as not to die. Don, you hear me? Ah, voilà.
Read the text. Wait.
Voilà, c'est ça. Ouais.
I will read just some sentences.
D'accord.
1. J'écris pour ne pas mourir. 2. Je regarde le monde chaque année avec un peu plus de douceur pour ne pas mourir. 12. S'asseoir au bord d'un étang sous les trembles avec son matériel de pêche et ne plus bouger, ne rien pêcher pour ne pas mourir. 15. Toute phrase contient le peu d'énergie qu'il faut pour ne pas mourir. 18. Oublier, oublier encore, ne jamais cesser d'oublier pour ne pas mourir. 24. Nous vivons en équilibre perchés sur le mât d'un navire échoué pour ne pas mourir. 31. Assis au bord du monde avec tous les autres, les vivants, les morts, les pas encore nés pour ne pas mourir. 40. On tombe amoureux tous les 100 mètres depuis l'enfance pour ne pas mourir. 44. Le silence contient tous les ingrédients pour ne pas mourir. 48. Tenter de comprendre quand il n'y a rien à comprendre et ne pas chercher à comprendre quand il faudrait comprendre pour ne pas mourir. 53. On imagine la foule de ses descendants, la foule de ses ancêtres. On ferme les yeux tout seul au point d'étranglement pour ne pas mourir. 61. 365e soirée brochette pour ne pas mourir. 67 accumulés, additionnés, entassés, des listes d'objets, des listes de mots, des listes de livres, des kilomètres d'écrits pour ne pas mourir. 73. Écrire la nuit dans un fauteuil face à la fenêtre, 3252 fenêtres éclairées pour ne pas mourir. 76. Crier pour crier, et crier encore et se démolir la gorge pour ne pas mourir. 81. Comprendre pour comprendre, pour comprendre, pour comprendre, et tout au fond comprendre de n'y rien comprendre pour ne pas mourir. 90. Courir plus vite que la poésie pour ne pas mourir. 93. Nous dépensons une énergie colossale pour nous maintenir à 37 degrés Celsius et pour ne pas mourir. 97. Jeter l'argent par les fenêtres pour ne pas mourir, puis descendre dans la rue très rapidement pour récupérer son argent et pour ne pas mourir. 100. Aujourd'hui est un jour parfait pour ne pas mourir. This is a text that I read very often with musicians, with the beginning very slowly, very, very quiet, and the end completely silly, completely destroy.
And Patrick, can I just say it's a completely different version? C'est pas la même.
Yeah, perhaps, right? Peut-être. Ouais.
It's a multiplicity of poems at once.
The text is moving.
Yes.
For some years. There is 3 editions of this text in France.
Uh-huh.
3 edition, 3 editor, different editor.
Mm.
I think I was long, so I think I can stop here. It's a good thing to finish by aujourd'hui est un jour parfait pour ne pas mourir.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Today is a perfect day for not dying. I think it's really fascinating to engage with the strange technology of Zoom.
Yeah.
So that you are not using, for example, the audience
Yeah.
as a chorus or the multi-track recording.
It's the first time that I read like that in front of alone in my room with only the screen. It's the first time. And it's the first time I read in English also.
But very well.
For you, I don't know.
But did you feel like it's a performance, or are we too far away? It's like a performance, or no?
What I do here?
Here, yeah.
I think it's a kind of performance, yeah. A quiet performance. A very quiet performance, I think, yeah. Because you have not the same energy without the people.
Mm.
So I read, I do what I can without people. It's very strange.
Did you feel, when you were listening to Hélène before,
Yeah.
did you feel that she is doing something similar with rhythm and repetition, or is it different?
I think there is some some point commun.
Mm-hmm.
There
Common point, yeah.
join some, but I don't understand English very well. Really, I don't understand very well, and I don't understand also other language.
Dutch.
Just like French and mathematics.
And music.
I have 2 languages, French and math.
Are you using maths to construct these ideas?
I don't use mathematics, but I use very often numbers.
Hmm.
It's not really mathematics, it's easier, but yeah, numbers are very important, and the structure. And ce qu'on appelle en français la rigueur. Rigueur. I don't know how you say that in English. Rigueur.
Rigor.
Rigueur.
Strictness, exactness, rigor.
Okay. And I think music is more near mathematics, but poetry is not near mathematics. It's very, and language, the French language or the English language are far away for mathematics. But music is little mathematics.
What about logic? Isn't logic the link between mathematics and poetry?
Logic is a branch of mathematics, and I don't know what to say about logic. I try to be logic, yeah. And I try to break logic in some time. I think it's very interesting to try to break, to destroy logic. It's very difficult, but not impossible.
But your manifesto is in fact very logical.
I think it's very logical, and I try to break logic. The two in the same time. Yeah.
Hélène, did you want to say something about the similarities and the differences? You're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I think for me it was very interesting, and to see. I think it's. I see similarities, but there are also things I don't do as much. I studied logic as well, and but I don't use it as much in poetry, and I think it's very. I really like it. Yeah, but that's the question. The question is, say something about the difference.
Similarity, yeah.
Yeah, it is it is kind of different, but for me, it's both about structure, but there's I'm not playing with the logical structure as much as Patrick does, I think. But structure is for us both the center of the musicality of our poetry, I think.
I agree. Patrick? Yeah. Patrick, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. And I don't understand everything, so it's difficult for me.
Yes, of course.
And it's difficult to speak also.
Of course. It's unfair to ask, really, especially when you've given us a wonderful performance. Well, enormous thanks to both of you. And now a third pleasure. It's like those, yes, a third pleasure, which is to introduce Krista. Krista Boberg was born in 1970 in Falun, Sweden, now lives in Gothenburg with his wife and daughter. He's a librarian. His latest collection of poems, Terpsitone, was published in 2016. And in 2019, he released an essay on the works of the Swedish minimalist poet, Ola Julen. In 2020, a collaboration with artist Carl Larsson Wallen resulted in the handmade miniature book, 22335, which is only 2.4 by 3.4 centimeters. Ah, it's beautiful. With photographs and 53 poems. Boberg is translated into English, Spanish, Turkish, and Croatian. He also works with text and sound as well as lyrics. The duo Axelsson och Boberg, Sprida Oro, forgive me, Krista. Axelsson and Boberg Spread Worry will release their first vinyl EP in spring 2021. It's a great pleasure to introduce Krista, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Sudeep, Fiona, and Don. Also, very, very much thank you. I will read everything in English except one poem. I will read in Swedish first, and I will end with a sound poem that will need no translation. And I think I will read the poems in without explanations or introductions. So I will just begin to read. A glimmer of sun travels across the desk, settling at length on the manuscript page, its whiteness illuminated, and from being one with the indoor gloom, the sheet of paper transforms into a window of light, an opening in openness, an image of thought, thought as image. And again, I'm reminded of description's final frontier, existing inaccessible, existing as transgression, as a shoal formed by the water, by thought, resistance against that same water. You have no need to go far. You have no need to turn away. Nearness is a fissure, the empty air sufficient. You have no need for yourself. Here we are privileged with a pain that goes unfelt. A derelict koi pond you drift through each night in dreams that wither even as they unfold. The last word in the last line in the last poem that is included in the first two editions, but not in the third, which is the only one available to us. Daily life as reference work, allusions to sources that don't exist. A hopeless enterprise that lends hope, a self-righteous sensation that we do our utmost to counteract. This engine, this sniffing. We click through file after file, release document after document, flipping page after page over the end. A work victory, a mutiny of the body, our tired but happy forearms asleep in a dark filing cabinet somewhere. At night, our dreams condemn our dreams in layers of dreams upon layers of dreams. This counterproduction, this betrayal. But now these words, hence these words that precede the last word in the last line in the last poem that is included in the first two editions, but not in the third, which is the only one available to us. Now, 19 very short poems. That I work my way towards zero. That your presence precedes you. That our defects make us human. That memories of you are like shows. That the increasing increases. That already my body is dust. That you are a trace passing through. That there is a risk of frost. That the soul space is our bones. that the absence holds you back. That thought is the blinking of gills. That day is a circumcised eye. That the dance dissolves the dancer. That you are the flawless stone. That you wake from sleeplessness. That not knowing you is the ideal. That the light of sorrow and lust that the airship flees its cloud compound. That the tenderness is there. Now the Swedish poem. Jag har gjort något med min hjärna. Jag gör det fortfarande. Jag behöver ett annat sätt att beskriva det på. Jag kan inte beskriva det på något annat sätt. Jag väger medvetandets viktlöshet i mina händer. Jag väger mina händer i mina tankar. Jag återkommer till detta faktum. Jag återvänder till dessa bilder. Jag vet att det inte är möjligt. Jag vet att jag tänker på dig i alla fall. Jag vet att sedan du dog är det omöjligt att fortsätta. Jag vet att det var omöjligt redan innan. Jag förväntar mig att det ska kännas så mycket mer. Jag vägrar känna det jag faktiskt känner. Jag vägrar gå med på att det skulle vara allt. Jag är det blundande snötäcket som lagt sig över torget. Jag tar en omväg. Jag tar en bok på måfå. Jag väntar ut dig, din jävel. This is the English translation. I have done something to my brain. I am still doing it. I need another way to describe it. I can't describe it in any other way. I weigh in my hands the weightlessness of consciousness. I weigh in my hands in my thoughts. I return to this fact. I turn back to these images. I know it's not possible. I know I'll think about you anyway. I know since you died, it's impossible to carry on. I know it was impossible even before. I expect to feel it so much more. I refuse to feel what I actually feel. I refuse to accept that this is it. I am the slumbering snow that has covered the town. I take a detour. I take a book at random. I'll wait you out, you bastard. And I will finish with this sound poem from my CD that came out 8 years ago called Skuggvältan. It's impossible to translate because it's a word that doesn't exist. Pe, ly, lo, ne, ka, kir, ne, kal, kal, pe, ly, pe, pso, kal, pe, di, lo, kal, pe, ly, pe, pso, kir, ke, di, ne, pso, ly, pe, kir, pe, li, di, lo, ke, ka, ke, pe, pso, pe, lo, ne, kir, pe, di, ne, ly, pso, di, ke, di, kir, ka, ke, pe, pso, li, ka, li, ke, li, lo, pe, ly, di, ke, ka, li, kal, pe, pso, lo, di, li, pso, kal, ke, pe, li, ke, kir, di, ke, li, di, kir, kal, lo, li, ke, li, kal, li, pe, kir, lo, pe, kir, pe, li, pso, di, kal, ka, pe, kal, ke, lo, di, pso, pe, ly, ka, kal, pe, ke, ne, pe, di, pso, ke, pe, kir, kal, ka, ly, di, ka, pso, ke, ka, pso, pe, ne, li, ka, kir, ke, ly, ne, pe, ke, ni, kir, pso, pe, ly, di, pso, pe, lo, di, kir, li, lo, ly, pe, ke, li, pe, ka, ke, pso, ly, lo, pe, ne, ly, pso, ka, pe, kir, lo, pe, ne, ka, li, ke, di, ne, li, pso, ke, ly, ne, li, pe, li, ke, li, pe, ne, pso, lo, pe, ke, ka, pe, ka, ne, pso, ke, ne, pe, ne, li, ke, pso, ke, ka, ke, ne, pso, ke, lo, ka, kir, ka, ke, pe, ka, li, ke, pso, li, lo, di, lo, kal, kir, ka, di, lo, kir, ka, lo, kir, ke, kal, pe, ne, ka, kir, ne, ka, pe, ly, kir, ne, lo, di, li, ke, pso, li. Thank you very much.
Wow, what an extraordinary and virtuoso ending as well, Krista. Talk about you make us laugh, you make us cry. First of all, you give us these wonderful poems and your 19 poems where there's the way you use silence to make us attend, to make the poem land. And then this last poem where I expected it to continue to a point where you could not bear it anymore and that you would completely run out of breath and you were physically taken apart by it. It's very erotic. And
I've never done it sitting down before. It was pretty exhausting, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
But
and does it normally have anything else with it?
I've done it in very many ways. I've done it with voice improvisator. I've done it with the audience, like canon. It never ended, actually.
Yeah.
On the CD, it's a soundtrack, some underwater sounds. Yeah, so I've done it in varying ways. Yeah.
Fantastic. And also the poem that you read in both languages was your grief poem was incredibly strong. It was, really.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, you really did make us laugh and cry.
Yeah, it's something I think about sound poetry and working with sound poetry and sound. It makes people actually laugh often, and I really don't know why, because this poem I read now, I think is really, really sad poem, but it makes people laugh. Yeah. So
I think it allows us childhood, doesn't it? It allows us
the
pleasure of language before we had to be responsible with it.
Yeah. But it's a kind of humorous dimension in sound poetry, I think, and working with text and sound. Not always, but often.
Yes. Well, it is a kind of grown-up license to play, isn't it? I mean, is that a difference between your musical life and your poetry life? Is your musical life more, I mean, I think quite punk, quite hardcore,
Yeah. Well,
but more ridiculous at the same time?
Yeah. For me, it's over the years, it's been totally separated, actually, music and poetry. But when I discovered text and sound and sound art and sound poetry, they started to come more close, I think. But writing for punk music or rock and roll, it's completely different than writing poetry, I think. You don't have to be subtle or anything. you can, you write for screaming and singing very, very loud, then you can't work like with the poems, actually. You have to work in another way.
Do you think the words...
Yeah.
Sorry, please, go.
No, but sound poetry, it's a kind of a middle way, I think.
Do you think sometimes the words are wasted in your songs? I'm being provocative.
No. I think I thought of that when I heard Patrick and Hélène reading. You have to, in rock music, if it's nothing else, it's a kind of trust in the language too. I think you have to trust these single lines, even when they are not that good. You have to trust it, and singers and the bands do. They really trust those sometimes really lousy lines. And when I heard Hélène reading and so on, she trusted so much in the rhythm, the pulse. So as a listener, I almost forgot what is she reading. It doesn't matter, because you are getting into this pulse and rhythm, and you want to stay there too. Yeah.
Yes. And with Patrick also, when he was reading and the screen didn't correlate with what he was reading in French, there's a kind of triumph of sound over the...
Sorry, I missed you there.
With Patrick, when he was reading, sometimes the screen didn't correlate. For example, the Pour ne pas mourir, it's a different version of the poem. So the translation was actually a translation of another version. So so that kind of, you surrender to the sound. And
yeah, the difference between Patrick and Hélène, I think Hélène, like I said, was more into this rhythm, while Patrick was kind of working with the stage or the scene or the landscape in a way, opening up with the sounds and the words, I think. That's what my association went anyway. Yeah,
that's very interesting, because of course Patrick works with marionettes and performance and music, and Hélène is a very literary poet, I would think, but I shouldn't speak for them. I should invite them to comment too. So Hélène and Patrick, would you like to comment? Hélène, I can see you would. Good.
A comment on
yes.
what Chris said. Yeah, I can see this. For me, what you said, yes. For me, the rhythm is very important as a structure. So that's a leading power. That's true. Oh, I have a question for Krista. How does this sound poem look like? Because you were reading something, so
Yeah. I think it's very important to read what it says.
Oh wow, that's great. Oh yeah. Oh, thank you for showing. Yes. Nice. Yeah.
I noticed we've been joined by Magda Kernet, who read in our first session. And Magda, I don't know if you're there, but I wonder if you are, whether you had any thoughts about, I don't want to say prose poetry because I don't want to define some of your work like that if you wouldn't call it that, but these other strategies which nevertheless create a poetic space, because you could almost say Krista's 19 poems, they're not prose poems, but they are not, they're moving past the lyric structures in the same way as prose poetry. Would you agree?
Yes, I think Krista's poetry is a sort of thoughtful, poetic writing with an intellectual dimension, and at the same time a sort of emotional profoundness. And I also liked his last poem with the vowels, which was so funny, but also absurd. And I think this was the dimension Krista wanted to highlight when he said that this poem is a sorrow one. How he said, a sad one.
Yeah.
And I wondered why it is sad, because it seems like humorous. And finally, I understood that it is also the realization of the fact that languages are so numerous and unintelligible among them. So there is this cacophony which surrounds us anyway, even if we all speak English now and our native languages. But at the same time, there is also, at least in my case, a sort of sadness, because poets, they think in a sort of universal language, but at the same time they have to use a local language which diminishes their message. And there's also a kind of friction because of this, and I think all poets suffer because of this. This is what, in a way, the poem of vowels transmitted to me. I don't know if Krista agrees with this, but this is a little bit my understanding.
I think I have to give the audience this poem and have to make it out what they want of it, because of course it has a story behind it, but I really don't think it matters now, because it was a long time I wrote it and I had a reason for writing it the way I did. But the interesting thing was, for me, what I reached with this way of writing, and now it's more interesting what I reach in the audience. What do they get out of it? What do they find in it, and so on.
And I wonder whether Magda asked that because, you know, surrealism in the Romanian tradition is a kind of, can be a very subversive, angry, you know, response to the meaninglessness of life. And actually, I notice, I'm delighted to say that Sudeep is going to join us and say something. Sudeep, what was your, where have you gone?
Hi, I'm sitting in New Delhi. Welcome, all of you. It's such a treat to hear the three of you. Hélène, I'm seeing you after a long, long time.
Yeah, it's a long
we
time
met in
ago.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So many questions. I mean, all the poets are so diverse, but there are so many unifying threads, I think. I was wondering whether you could, all of you can separately talk about the impact of your own mother tongue, because the cadences and the textures and the way the words are inflected in Swedish, Dutch, and French, certainly I can see through my ear impact your writing clearly. So even though there is a lot of commonality between your poetry, but the sound and the music, which is sort of the focus of the evening, in a sense, in a tonal sense, is very different. The scales are different. Sometimes it's almost atonal, which is probably intentional. So I was just wondering whether you could talk about your own mother tongue vis-a-vis poetry, music, and English translations, how each one of them interact individually.
That's a very interesting question, Sudeep, and it's a very difficult one as well, because I can't really look outside of my mother tongue. I speak English, but I can't, and I can dream in English sometimes if I'm in England or in the United States, but still my point of reference is always my mother tongue. And I do think it's because my mother tongue is very important, the Dutch language. I often start with these phrases in the language that are used. So this grammar of sometimes just normal things people say, and then I built the poem, and these phrases make the rhythm and also the music in the poem. So yeah, it might be the case that you can't do the same rhythm in another language.
Yeah, I totally agree, actually, because the mother tongue is your lifeline. It's your,
yeah,
it's where you live and where you belong. Actually, I can't imagine being without it. So I can't speak any other language that well. So for me, that's the answer, I think. Yes, and of course, doing this sound poetry and so on, you work with language, your own language, in a kind of threshing way. You threshes it up a bit to find something new, maybe to articulate something wordless or something beyond the words or before the words. Yeah.
So would you say it's punkifying? Are you punkifying language?
No, I don't think so. But but it's hard to see outside your mother tongue, I think. At least for me, that's my home. That's my working area too.
You know, the poem, Krista, you read, which was, you know, just very, very short lines, extremely meditative with very deliberate, long pauses between the lines. In a sense, I felt, even though, I mean, you read and speak English extremely well. So I'm not going to say that that's only your, Swedish is only your mother tongue. So that you're being terribly modest.
Yeah.
But to me, that particular poem structurally seemed like you're echoing the landscape of Sweden in the winter, because there's so much sparseness, there's so much space. At the same time, that sort of, you know, underbelly rumbling of the sort of wintry, dark echo. So there's, to me, it's full of sound, full of music, but at the same time, a particular kind of meditation.
Yeah, that was a wonderful what you saw there, I think, about Sweden. I've never thought about that. But when you have this translation, you have also, it's about trust. You have to trust these translators there that have done this, that they find something new in the Swedish lines. So it's, for me, it's a kind of a new poem actually, but the images are there, I think, and the fragments that say these kind of, meditative things, they are there, but in a completely different way.
We should ask Patrick too. Patrick, about your relationship with French above all.
Yeah, I don't.
Your own language, your maternal language. It's a different relationship from the relationship to the whole field of language, or?
I don't understand. I don't know how to answer.
Ta langue maternelle, c'est quelque chose de spécial qui marche d'une façon spéciale pour toi ou quoi? Ou c'est...
Moi, je ne réfléchis pas à propos de ça. Je sais pas trop. Je suis dedans.
You say the same thing, that is within it.
Ja.
But you don't reflect on it. Yeah, c'est la même chose. Oui.
Yeah, and I don't like the expression langue maternelle. I don't like that.
Langue paternelle?
I have a big problem with my mother, so I don't like langue maternelle. I don't know. It's also the language of my father, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Why? No, I don't know.
Well, and Patrick already made the point that of having another language, which is mathematics, and I would suggest a third also, which is music. But
yeah, the third is music, yeah, and the fourth perhaps English.
I think the idea that an idea from mathematics is useful in understanding and sort of framing all this. In mathematics, when one sets out to do something, one starts with axioms. And the axioms are immutable. And often what one does then is explores all possible structures which fit the axioms and all the consequences. In poetry, oftentimes what we're doing is we're discovering the axioms that the poet was using, even though they may not have even thought of it that way. And in poetry, the axioms are mutable. They change. And that's described in many ways. One of the ways I always use is people come off the rails. You know, you have something that makes sense, and then all of a sudden it doesn't make sense anymore, but you're getting at something else. The three poets are so interesting because in this context, Hélène and Christer, they do things that are, there are things in their poetry which actually don't depend on logic at all. And of course, Patrick does as well, but his depends more on logic than, for instance, the TikTok or the sound poem. Anyway, it's just a notion I wanted to put out there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you, Don. Did anyone want to say anything about their propositions? And can we just also note that Miłosz Djerdjevic very astutely pointed out the performance is the other language that actually all three poets and perhaps more of us speak. Or have I managed to stop the conversation? In fact, actually look at the time. Perhaps I should have stopped the conversation. Well,
Sorry,
sorry, Sudeep, please.
performance is such a good word because, you know, you can, if you break up the word itself, form is at the center of it all. Perform ends. So you're kind of really linking so many different things. But yes, before Fiona says goodbye to everybody, I mean, I'd like to also join Fiona and Dawn thanking all three of you. Sorry, I have been invisible for various reasons, but on the screen certainly, but I've been listening very intently and I feel richer. I really, really feel richer after this evening because it was extraordinary, the three of you, extraordinary. Just in terms of depth and latitude and just the fragrance you bring with your voices. So deeply indebted and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very
for having
much.
us.
Yes, thank you to all three poets. I echo everything that Sudeep said. It's such an honor to us, but it's also just such an profound pleasure to have such amazing poetry just in this kind of intimate, but also not intimate, obviously, setting. It's just a joy and great to see you all again. And huge thanks to Sudeep for hosting. Huge thanks to everyone for attending. Huge thanks to Don for hosting. And I hope to see you all next time, but I hope we all see each other very soon in the same room too.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
will do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you all
Bye.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.